Welcome to Sacred TREKS, a show where we take Star Trek as a sacred text to see what life lessons we can take away from the franchise in order to help make us better people. For today's episode, let's explore the original series episode, the Corbomite Maneuver, one of my personal favorite episodes of the entire series, through the theme of willpower. You know, like a Green Lantern. This is Sacred TREKS.
Space, the final frontier.
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 It does not matter that we will never reach our ultimate goal. The effort yields its own rewards.
Human being dead.
A single act of compassion can put you in touch with your own humanity.
Loss of life is to be mourned, but only if the life was wasted. My child's was not.
The most profound discoveries are not necessarily beyond that next star. They're within us.
Your father was captain of a starship for 12 minutes.
He saved 800 lives.
I dare you to do better.
You're a Starfleet captain. You believe in service, sacrifice, compassion, and love.
The past is written, but the future is left for us to write. And we have powerful tools, Rios. Openness, optimism, and the spirit of curiosity.
The needs of the many outweigh
the needs of the few.
Or the one.
These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise.
Its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Let's start off, as always, with the synopsis of the episode, the Corbomite Maneuver. The section of the video where I make a sarcastic summation of the plot of the episode in order to remind us that while we are taking Star Trek as sacred and as something we all love, it is not a perfect work, as nothing is. The Enterprise is taking some photographs of space and everyone is bored. So bored that apparently the cameraman is trying to have fun with his job. Wow!
Now!
Suddenly, the ship comes across a strange discovery, a spacefaring everlasting gobstopper. And I mean everlasting because everyone loves to stare at the view screen for a really, really long time in this episode. Kirk gets called up from sickbay where he was having his weekly excuse for William Shatner to have his shirt off, not that I'm complaining, and finally arrives on the bridge with a handheld shot that would make Star Trek Discovery proud. Navigator Bailey raises his voice for a second and Spock chastises him.
It's blocking the way.
Quite unnecessary to raise your voice, Mr. Bailey.
But I mean, who is Spock to chastise someone for yelling a little bit?
No need to shout, Ensign Spock.
But Spock even goes so far as to recommend unnecessary surgery to Bailey.
Means I happen to have a human thing called an adrenaline.
Does sound most inconvenient, however. Have you considered having it removed?
Oh, Spock, come on, man. With the Enterprise unable to escape the strange cube, Bailey starts to grow nervous and scared in the face of danger. I mean, I'd be scared too at a spinning cube. Kirk decides to eventually destroy the cube, though Bailey briefly hesitates before firing the phasers. After ordering the crew to do drills, Kirk is warned by McCoy that Bailey may not be up to snuff on the bridge.
I'm especially worried about Bailey. Navigator's position's rough enough. Seasoned man.
I think he'll cut.
After Manly Man Kirk complains about having a female yeoman,
When I get my hands on the headquarters genius that assigned me a female yeoman.
What's the matter, Jim? Don't you trust yourself?
and eating salad,
What the devil is this? Green leaves?
a giant sphere that dwarfs the Enterprise appears. More staring occurs.
You get a reaction shot, and you get a reaction shot, and you get a reaction shot. Everyone gets a reaction shot!
After that, Kirk attempts to contact the sphere. Baylock, a commander of the First Federation, responds, saying that he believes the Enterprise to have hostile intent after they destroyed their warning buoy. You know, that cube thing that totally was going to destroy the ship earlier. Good warning? Also, I love that Baylock is from the First Federation, as if they knew there was going to be a second one after they named themselves. Baylock, hilariously, states the Enterprise will be destroyed in 10 minutes.
We make assumption you have a deity, or deities, or some such beliefs which comfort you.
Kirk gives one of the most Star Trekian speeches of all time.
In most cases, we have found that intelligence, capable of a civilization, is capable of understanding peaceful gestures.
But Bailey basically goes catatonic, so much so that Sulu has to flip the switches for him. Uhura backtracks Blaylock's communication so that the Enterprise can get a good look at him and, oh god, it appears he's the most terrifying looking, clearly a puppet of all time. Bailey understandably freaks out at the sight of a race of puppet people.
The end of everything! What are you, robots? Wound up toy soldiers? Don't you know when you're dying? Watching regulations and orders. What do they mean? Bailey, you're relieved.
To try to survive, Kirk decides to bluff his way through the situation, claiming that all human ships are covered in a material known as Corbomite that instantly destroys any attacker. Blaylock appears unconvinced, so Spock takes the moment to make a dig at Sarek.
I regret not having learned more about this Balak. In some manner, he was reminiscent of my father.
Then may heaven have helped your mother.
As Bailey comes back to request being put back on duty before they die. Yet when the 10 minutes goes by, nothing happens, so Blaylock clearly failed to call Kirk's bluff. Blaylock continues to demand proof of Corbomite though, but Kirk denies the request. Yeoman Rand delivers Kirk coffee just so Kirk can look smug, as Blaylock trackers the ship to a First Federation planet for destruction. Everyone stares again for a really long time as the Enterprise breaks off from the tractor beam. With Blaylock's ship now powerless, Kirk decides to beam over to his ship to help him, because that's how Starfleet do. And he decides to take Bailey and McCoy with him as well, because in a potentially hostile first contact situation, you definitely want to have the dude who was screaming on the bridge less than 30 minutes ago with you, and the dude who's mildly racist towards anyone who isn't human. But over on Blaylock's ship, they actually discover that Blaylock actually looks like a child version of that guy from Star Trek Discovery. Or was it Deep Space Nine? Or that Ferengi in Star Trek Enterprise? Or actor Clint Howard. Blaylock offers the two men Tranya, which, despite having no idea if it's poisonous to humans, Kirk, McCoy, and Bailey drink. Turns out all of this was just a test to check what the Enterprise and Starfleet's intentions were, and Blaylock, who is so isolated and lonely, oh Blaylock, aren't we all right now? We're all really isolated right now. Asks for a crew member to exchange information with. Kirk, wholly ignoring diplomatic procedures, decides to leave Bailey with Blaylock as an ambassador. Yep, Bailey, the guy who was freaking out, is now the ambassador for the whole human race to a clearly more powerful civilization. That's totally gonna go well. The episode ends as Blaylock awkwardly shows the crew members around an incredibly tiny cardboard-made spaceship. Alright, so now let's look at this episode with a more serious eye through the theme of willpower. The Corbomite Maneuver is easily one of my favorite episodes of the original series, even despite the endless minutes of view-screen staring, casual sexism, and hatred of the joys of salad. Because it showcases the first time we get a classic Star Trek situation on the show. Just like his later famous starship battles in Wrath of Khan, Kirk is trapped in a no-win scenario. He's clearly outgunned.
When one is outmatched, the game is over. Checkmate.
Yet, Kirk is never one to stand by and accept a loss. As we all know, when Kirk doesn't like the rules of the game, he changes the game.
Not chess, Mr. Spock. Poker.
Instead of a game of firepower, Kirk makes it a battle of wills. But what is willpower? Despite it being apparently a Green Lantern emotion, it's a rather mysterious and enigmatically defined thing. We often define willpower in our ability to deny ourselves things, to stop ourselves from succumbing to our impulses. We stop ourselves from having that calorie-filled Tranya drink for dinner, or keep ourselves going to the sickbay gym despite preferring to go home after work. Yet it also seems strange to define a supposedly positive emotion or ability through its negatives, what it doesn't allow us to do. Instead, it's perhaps better to define willpower through the idea of self-control. One's ability to actively decide what impulses to act on and which to not. And this is what Kirk can do in spades. In the face of a great challenge of the unknown, he can overcome his fear, his impulse to run and hide, in order to outthink his opponent. That's what a game of wills truly means. It's not about actually being able to outmaneuver an opponent, it's the ability to remain controlled and avoid temptations as long as possible. and also remain cool-headed in a hot situation and feel okay with living in that hot moment. It's uncomfortable to live in constantly difficult situations, hard to hold on to our own composure and mental health when the world feels like it's falling around us. It's why it's interesting that the episode directly sets up Kirk in parallel to Bailey, as McCoy points out.
Because you spotted something you liked in him? Something familiar, like yourself, say about 11 years ago?
Kirk and Bailey aren't that different, both ambitious men with careers on the command track. Yet what differentiates the two men, besides age and experience, is their willpower. Bailey is quick to run hot, to turn to weapons or aggression or fear in the moment. He can't control himself because he just wants to be out of this horrific situation as fast as possible. So he lets his emotions guide him to what he feels would be the quickest solution, even if it's not the best solution. Kirk, on the other hand, doesn't let his emotions guide him, but his dedication to his principles, to seek out new life and civilization and extend a hand. To try to believe that even in the worst of circumstances, that we can still come out on top and still hold true to the better side of humanity. As I stated in the synopsis, Kirk gives one of the most Star Trekian speeches ever.
Those of you who have served for long on this vessel have encountered alien life forms. You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves, an irrational fear of the unknown. But there's no such thing as the unknown, only things temporarily hidden.
But I like how this also implies that this positive humanity is one that comes out of a strength of will. That our ability to see the better in ourselves is not something that all is taken for granted by Kirk and the rest of the crew, but something that they have to actively still strive to choose. It's not this idea that all humans have finally evolved past this, it's that we are more aware that we need to actively choose it. Bailey fails in that aspect, and instead falls into aggression. There are many who state that Starfleet and the humanity of the 23rd century of Star Trek had evolved beyond such petty emotions, but it's clearly not true, as we see with Bailey. It's still there, that fear of the unknown, of death. It's in all of us, yet we can actively choose to overcome it. To not choose to take it for granted is to believe that we are perfect, and we most clearly are not. All of us, even the humans of the 23rd century, can make mistakes. And if you allow me one quick sidetrack here, it's why I don't get why people don't think the darker aspects of Star Trek Discovery of Picard are in keeping with Trek. That we see a Starfleet or humanity that doesn't always live up to the, quote, Gene Roddenberry ideal future. Roddenberry's ideals, at least in the original series, and maybe less so in the first few seasons of Next Generation, were that we were actively deciding to go on this path, not that we had completely moved beyond it. As they say, it's easy to be a saint in paradise, so we need to remember that we are not perfect and we are not in a paradise. That's why I really enjoy the end of this episode, where Bailey gets a chance to be redeemed, as weird as the logistics of trusting Bailey as an ambassador are. The episode does acknowledge that Bailey is flawed, that he failed, and that's okay.
Ah, you represent Earth's best, then.
No, sir, I'm not. I'll make plenty of mistakes.
But you'd find out more about us that way.
Bailey can still work to be better, that we can still continue even when we fail. That's what Star Trek Discovery Season 1 tried to do with Burnham's character, someone who failed and who was working to come back even after failure.
The only way to defeat fear is to tell it no.
That is real humanity. The ability to acknowledge our imperfections, our failures, to control our worst impulses, but still having the chance to work out of it, to come out of it, to redeem ourselves. This is a feeling that I know all too well right now on a much smaller scale. I write and film these videos a few weeks, maybe even a month in advance of when they go out. And right now, as of this filming, we're still quarantining from COVID-19. And hopefully, though probably not, that's all gotten better by the time this video airs, but like I said, who knows. But what I do know is that right now, sometimes my willpower feels frayed. It's hard for me to control my emotions, to not lose my temper with my roommate or family members. I sometimes get frustrated or irritated or snippy or yell, all because of the strain and stress of the moment we're all in. And I don't like that about myself, but I do think it's something I do. But it's also something that is understandable. I always try to apologize and hope for forgiveness. I can't decide that I'm forgiven, that's for other people to decide, but I at least try to forgive other people. And I try, and sometimes this is the hardest part, to forgive myself. To not beat myself up for failing to be the person who I want to be all the time. It's okay to make mistakes as long as we try to pick ourselves up and keep working to improve ourselves. Our willpower is not always going to be perfect. We can't always win, especially when it feels like we are in a no-win situation like the whole world seems to be in right now. And we don't always have the power to change the game like Kirk does. But what we can do is forgive ourselves when we fail and keep moving forward to try to be the best versions of ourselves, the best versions of humanity that we can be.
You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves, an irrational fear of the unknown. But there's no such thing as the unknown. Only things temporarily hidden, temporarily not understood.
That's it for this episode of Sacred Treks, but I'd love to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. Did you like the episode, the Corbomite Maneuver? What themes did you get out of this episode? Did you agree with my theme of willpower? Did you like my analysis of it? I'd love to hear all that down in the comments below. And also, if you want more Sacred Treks, more discussions of Star Trek, or politics and social issues through geek topics, give my channel a subscribe. And if you want to help make these videos even better, don't forget to consider giving to my Patreon page. Every little bit helps, especially right now during the crazy financial crisis that we all seem to be in. And I've currently lost my full-time job, so helping me out over on Patreon really does mean a lot, especially right now. But regardless of if you comment or if you subscribe or if you get to my Patreon, I'm just glad that you stopped by, and I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. Thank you so much to all my patrons who support me over on Patreon, and an extra special thanks to my commander level and above patrons, Ashley Allen Bocello, Miranda Janelle, Eli Berg-Moss, Ashlyn Solstice, Christina Dalliance, Greg Gillum, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl, Wayne Twitchell, Ish the Mad, Buttoneer, Randy Thompson, Mouse Pounder, Jemshin, Susan Banks, Wellington Marcus, Lorena Mesa, Alexander Miller, John Steele, William Stewart, Michael Beam, Gavin Robinson, Aaron Brown, Christy Marie Johnson, Jason Knott, Maggie Evans, Maeve, Subraxis, Zach Cody, Dante St. James, Wen Dizzle Bizzle, Auntie Cat 808, Patrick Shannon, Din Hagney, Mark the Edge, Bree Beecher, Polly Mina, and Gretchen Badger. Thank you to all of you. I couldn't do this without you, so thank you so much for your support.